Good afternoon and welcome to Beyond the Lines podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Watson, on this fabulous Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today. Just going to check the sound and make sure all is good in the hood. Is everything good in your hood today? Good in your hood and under your hood. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, right? Very good. Well, welcome. Lots going on, lots to do, lots to say. I hope everybody is looking forward to a fabulous weekend, and the cold chill has begun. So the hibernation process has begun in a way, but we're still not tired of it yet. So we're going to start with a little bit of a hagwash because she just is spewing out so much content every day, hoping that her audience forgets what was covered the day before. So we are going to just stay on top of it, and we're going to watch a little bit of that. Then we're going to watch a Beto O'Rourke Norm Eisen clip that was shared on X. And I've referenced it a few times. And so we're going to check that out. And what was the third thing that we were going to do? I think it is important to revisit the Mike Benz media literacy video that I did about 4 weeks ago, if we get time to do that. But I'm going to share the YouTube link in the description because I think it's a good refresher. It's just a ton of information, and moving into the continued exciting Trump presidency that we are in, and just a lot, again, going on all fronts. We're firing on all cylinders. So pull up a seat, do your laundry, hang out with us, appreciate it, like and subscribe. So with that being said, let's go over to, let's do our screen share here. And we're going to start with Miss Richardson. Let's go. Let's see what's
Facebook to come on, but we have here Newton, Wisconsin.
So before we get started here, I think in the description I have here that Richardson is doing a MAGA face again. We've chronicled this for at least 2 years now. Okay. I know that if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see a number of episodes maybe starting from maybe like a month ago, but that is because we were not doing YouTube. But we started a Rumble channel about 2 years ago. So all of our episodes are on Rumble. And so if you want to go revisit those, they are all there for you. And so this time last year, which was in like August of whatever it was with the DNC convention, it was probably May of last year that I really noticed this reframing. I don't want to say reframe because that's giving a little too much credit, but just this appropriating MAGA talking points, the MAGA movement, the MAGA platform, and really reappropriating it to what Richardson believes to be is this moment in time. And so we're noticing it again. And so we want to just watch it, see it, recognize it, and we're just tracking. Just a little bit of tracking, that's all. We're going to go to it.
Caryville, Texas, Edwardsville, Illinois. Is that related to Mary Todd Lincoln?
So obviously we're going to be starting and stopping. This is typically what we do.
Walla Walla, Washington, and there was a tie between her and the Edwards family. Vernon, Connecticut. Since then. California, China, yesterday. Here we go. Here are my Facebook peeps. Tasmania, how cool is that? Indiana, Oakland did a politics chat last Thursday.
So this was a clip that was posted. This was her politics chat from October 21st. So that was a couple days ago. So this was her first live stream that she did post the No Kings
And
protests, which she had been promoting for a long, going really hard with the promotion for it.
Since we last met here, which was, I did a politics chat last Thursday. And then on Saturday, Joanne Freeman and I, my friend Joanne and I, talked a little bit before the No Kings rallies. And the No Kings rallies were big. They were important. They were the only story that day. And it's really interesting the degree to which they did not get a lot of coverage in legacy media. Not necessarily a surprise, because I think one of the ways it helps to think about media these days is as a number of the legacy media sites have fabulous reporters, but a lot of them, you should think of them as corporations that have a media section as opposed to being actual straight media. One of the exceptions to that is a place like the New York Times, which, like or dislike, is not a corporation that then has a branch that is the New York Times. It simply is the New York Times. So you can see in, although it was the New York Times that didn't cover the protests nearly.
And why is that? I'm just asking, why is it that legacy media did not cover the No Kings protests, nor did the New York Times? And I'm open to theories.
Really as much as one would have thought that they should have when you think of the ways in which the New York Times and other legacy papers covered the Tea Party, for example.
Right, because she thinks this is the Tea Party movement. So unless, right?
The media section. Okay. Long ago now, but those were much smaller turnouts from what was on Saturday, probably around 7 million people. The upper limit was 8.2, according to G. Elliott Morris of Strength in Numbers. But that was a really big deal, because what you did by getting out there and showing up was, first of all, demonstrating to other people that this was a safe, joyful space to be in, convincing people they weren't alone. It also said to a number of businesses who were thinking that in order to appeal to a majority, they had to reach out to the Trump administration and had to do what they said. You told those companies and corporations that, in fact, this is where the real momentum is those who oppose the loss of our democracy. Also, the size and the joy, the different art and music, costumes, and so on, the street carnival atmosphere does a lot to open up opposition to an authoritarian government to a greater number of people. That is, there are a lot of avenues in.
Okay. This is Nikki here. Why is she saying what you did was this? Which would probably confirm my speculation, was that when her and Freeman were doing their show and Freeman was saying how she was going to go to a No Kings protest, Richardson, I speculated that Richardson was actually, although she was heavily promoting this to her audience, this event, she was not in fact going to go herself. Just my speculation, just my sense of things. And so why is she definitely reading off of the teleprompter? But why is she saying this is what you showed? Why is she not saying it like this is what we showed, right? Right? Because we're all in this together, right? So why is she saying this? And why does it sound so inauthentic and inorganic as she's saying it? Like, if you actually felt this way, wouldn't you be able to actually describe it in that way? Why would you have to read off of something else that was written for you in this sort of like detached way? You know what I'm saying? How it feels like detached. And this is what you did. You showed that there was going to be joy and, in the face of an authoritarian regime. Huh?
Which makes it much more welcoming to people who are not themselves interested in authoritarianism.
You made it so inviting for people who this is what she actually said, who they themselves are not interested in an authoritarian regime. It's so funny, like how she phrases these things and how she's thinking of this, which we can only assume that if she's saying these things, it's how she's thinking about them. Unless, of course, it's being written for her and she's detached from what she's saying. And so she doesn't actually think these things, or what? Help me understand this. And so then it's just like with the Antifa thing, like Antifa means anti-fascist, and who isn't against fascism, right? They're using these loaded words and trying to, they realize that they have to connect with people. They have to connect with most people. So they use this really disconnected way and fragmented way of using words to try and connect with people. How's it going? How's it working? So people that don't, it actually invited people into this, those who would rather not have authoritarianism, right? Okay. And we've already watched a lot of clips from the protest. You've watched them all. They're all over X. Everybody knows what it is. And so this felt a little tone deaf to me. What do you think?
That is, the wider the tent, the more people will come in, and the better the feelings about that movement will be as things get harder going forward. So that was a really big deal.
Wait. Flames coming out of my face. Who can name that movie? What movie is that from? Tell me in the comments. So it's a big tent, welcomes more people in for as things are about to get really hard. Things are about to get harder. Why are things? I mean, I know why, but why would she say that and present it that way?
And it was really exciting to see. I don't know, for a lot of people, I think it really felt good to recognize that there is this building momentum. And it happened, I think it was on Friday. I did an event with.
Just felt really good. I didn't go, but it felt really good. Seems like everybody felt really good about it. It was a feel-good thing. The people that were there felt really good about it. Everybody else that was watching the interviews and seeing it and doing all,
Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona, and he had been in the Marines, and he said something that really stood out to me. He said, in the Marines, they say, hesitation kills, but momentum wins the day. And that's the way to think about the protests against the Trump administration. Our momentum, where is the momentum? Where do things seem to be changing most fully? And you can see that the real momentum right now is against the Trump administration. Trump's numbers continue to plummet pretty dramatically. New polls out in the last couple of days show that he's in real trouble. And the people turning out to oppose him, putting pressure on organizations like the company that tried to sideline Jimmy Kimmel and then had to bring him back. You can see that momentum building. One of the other things that
what momentum is building? What momentum?
The senator said, though, was if you are not moving forward, you should be communicating. And there's certainly times when you can't be moving forward, but that idea that we got to keep communicating is really important too. So that's what happened over the weekend, which was like a lifetime ago, right? And you saw the reaction.
This was Tuesday, right? October 21st was Tuesday. Why is she glazing over it, saying like it was like a lifetime ago? The last show we did on the No Kings protest, so we've been forecasting, we've been projecting this. This is what we've been saying, is that this was going to be a flop. She's almost seems to be right. Why is she doing that?
Action on the part of the Trump administration to the No Kings rallies, trying to make fun of them, trying to say they were unimportant. Before them, they said that the people who turned out for the rallies would be, terrorists and anti-American and Marxists and, any word they could grab. Afterward, they have gone back to saying that, in fact, the protesters are all ancient hippies. And that's an interesting approach considering.
We actually called Senator Johnson on this and said it's not an anti-America rally. It's not going to be all of these. It is going to have this Antifa faction and this sort of like maybe even like the old left or these sort of different the labels that you are sort of describing that. But we all knew that it was going to be the older white people. Like that was that one did not come as a surprise to anybody.
Considering the fact that older Americans turn out to vote and they vote in big numbers. And the fact that so many of us remember a world before the craziness of the past 40 years, I think is one of the reasons we're turning out, because we would like our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren to have a better world.
What happened in the last 40 years then? Should we look at that too?
In the last 40 years has given to this generation of Americans. Yeah. So they both tried to denigrate the No Kings movement, and then Trump and J.D. Vance and the official White House account circulated a number of either images or videos, they didn't all do the same ones, that were really quite offensive, either with Trump and Vance in crowns, the video that you may or may not have seen of Trump in what seemed to be a fighter pilot, a fighter jet that had King Trump written across the side of it, with him sort of in a halo and a crown in the plane, that then proceeded to drop excrement on American cities, which is a really interesting pull together of sort of, if you will pardon the expression, the shit posting that this administration has done to keep all eyes on it and to sort of try and be edgy, in the slang sense of sort of being provocative and a little bit out there or a lot out there, but at the same time, really insulting Americans, which is something that the radical right has complained bitterly. Anytime a Democrat says anything that they think is even vaguely offensive, they turn green and complain.
All they've done since Trump announced he was going to run the first time is shitpost and talk shit on Trump and anybody that gasped wanted to vote for him. And it never stopped. And in fact, it seemed to get worse. So this whole of being so offended by the shit posting seems a little out of touch.
Plain bitterly. Here you literally have a president showing images of dropping excrement.
We literally had a topless transgender woman on the White House lawn. We literally had, okay.
On fellow Americans, including one who was identified pretty clearly as a 23-year-old influencer. So it wasn't somebody totally random, but that singling out of an influencer.
It was Harry Sisson, whatever his name is. You guys all saw the clip. Oh, and a 23-year-old. Oh, because he's a child, right? Y'all are going to say that because that was this really odd talking point that people were doing about Charlie Kirk is that he debated children, which was a very so weird thing to how to describe it is you would describe it as students who are in fact adults and oftentimes adults. Oh, but he was a 23-year-old. Harry Sisson, whatever his name is, he's not 18. He's not 17. They try and portray him because he's been doing this same brand for however many years. Because sort of when he started, he was like a child, right? And now he's an adult, 23-year-old. I had, one child, and I was pregnant by the time I was 23. So, this isn't woe is me for him. And this influencer. So he wasn't some random person. She's so much more offended and appalled by this shit post by President Trump's team about Harry Sisson than she was about the public assassination of Charlie Kirk, who she didn't even refer to as an influencer, but a far-right provocateur.
Influencer was again really something coming from an administration. There's also another funny little.
Oh, they're allowed to do it, but Trump's not allowed to do it, right? Oh, the president of the United States isn't allowed to do it, except what I didn't realize it was so it was so sacred, Bill Clinton. I didn't realize, that like everybody else had this squeaky clean, so perfect cannot be touched record.
Little twist in that a lot of the memes that have come out of the White House and the administration have been those edgy memes that were, that were designed to appeal to a certain group of people. Poop jokes are very second grade. And that's a real interesting shift there that suggests at some level whether or not Trump was actually behind that video. Certainly seems that somebody is pushing the idea that he is approaching a second childhood. And that I thought was really interesting. It was really quite.
Are you editorializing again? He's approaching a second childhood. They always take something that we could all look at and see and talk about, like the shit posting or whatever. And then they make this claim, right? It's like, Trump is going after his political opponents. He's a fascist, right? They take this like claim, right, that you could argue, and then they take it to this like level of like they get the final say in this sort of thing. Hello there. They get this thing in the final say, and it's like, oh, it's poop jokes. So this was her train of thought. Poop jokes we're so offended. Poop jokes are second grade, and it seems to just really be representative of his second childhood. Like, what does that even? What are you?
Different than other things that they have posted. All right, so that's what happened over the weekend, and there's other stuff that happened on the weekend too. But let me get into your questions, and then maybe we can go back to where the weekend was, because the point of what I hope to do today is to recognize that there's a ton of stuff going on. It's really hard to keep your feet under you, especially when a lot of it is very deeply troubling in different ways. And I do think that there is, though, a pattern through it all. I might be wrong. I'm struggling like you all are too, but there are certain things that seem to jump out. So let me start with your questions. The first one that everybody wants to hear about is the East Wing of the White House. Can Trump do that? Well, he does not have the permissions he needs to have. I'll explain how that's happened. So no, he can't do that, but he did. And this is, I think, a real signal of two things. One, of the administration's real attempt to demonstrate essentially authoritarian power with the sort of logic of catch me if you can. And that may or may not be something that ends up happening, that he does get caught in the end. But the reasoning behind the White House, apparently, once again, this administration could not be less transparent about anything. But when Trump first started talking about adding,
apparently, allegedly, seemingly, it appears to be
this ballroom to the White House, lots of people, including me, said you can't just do that, that there are layers upon layers of Park Service and historical associations and the Washington, D.C. and so on that have to sign off on any changes, literally to the point that that the doors in the White House are special, and there's all sorts of things that you cannot do because it's the White House, and the president doesn't own the White House. The president,
all of the same.
Planning Commission built by private corporations. That's actually something he's not supposed to be able to do to the people's house.
I mean, you could just look it up. The presidents that made changes to Obama did changes. I mean, you can just look it up. Oh, changes to the White House. they are so devastated by this. He had plans to do it. They're mad because they are saying that he jumped ahead and did it because he was mad about the protests. So everything is emotional about it. That he jumped ahead and went ahead and did construction, and it's bad optics to see a backhoe going through the east wing of the White House. And they have all of these emotional reasons of why they're just absolutely devastated. And what a metaphor for democracy is watching a backhoe go through the east wing of the White House.
I mean, there's any number of ways in that there are upgrades that should be made.
And Obama used taxpayer funds. And it's so funny because it's like everything that they try and do, like, for example, in my state in Pennsylvania, we still don't have a budget passed. So we're the only state, from what I read, that doesn't have a budget passed. Our Governor Shapiro, just put out he is promoting his book because they're saying that he wants to run in 2028, or that they want to run him. Remember, he was a considered candidate to be the vice president for Kamala Harris's race. Remember that? So he was one under consideration, and we were like, what's going to happen? Is it going to, like, why didn't he get the nod? And there were different speculations about why and why not. So they're saying that he's always wanted to run for president. He's very ambitious. Anyway, he just came out with a book, and the optics are not very good. So he's like going forward with his plan to like promote himself and such, but the optics are not very good because we don't have a budget passed. So it's like, how is it doesn't look good, right? I mean, that's whatever your opinion is of whatever, it's just from an optics perspective. And so they're trying to use this as bad optics for President Trump and the administration. And it is working in some ways with some people, but overall it's falling flat because it's privately funded. It was planned for a long time, and it actually shows strength because of the coming together of what he is doing, bringing people in, bringing people invested into the future of our country and the changes that his administration is making, what the people voted for, and this positive direction in building trust back up in institutions, working with people, empowering people, not powering over people. Agenda 47, America First. It is, people are not upset about the ballroom. People totally get it. And the fact that he's bringing in private investors and donors makes even more sense, because that's what he's had to do with the government as a whole, is bringing people in that have an invested interest in keeping money here in our country, investing back in our country, right? So getting invested interest from different industries to come together and, again, make America great again, bringing industry back here, investing in our country, right? Versus overextending and doing the globalist project. And so it makes perfect sense. So they're trying to turn it into this emotional thing. And it is for some people. You can read the comment section for her. Not all of those people are real. We've gone over that as well. But most people, just like with the No Kings protest, when most people see that, they have the same reaction. Nobody cares. So it's not like he's building this ballroom, and so it's like the government can be shut down, and but Trump's building this big ballroom and the government's getting shut down, but it's being privately funded, and so it was already planned for. And he's the one that's pulling tariff funding from he's the money that's been made off of tariffs, he's pulling it and using it to subsidize the hold on payments for different things right now. And Richardson is saying like, oh, he can't do that. But I guess he found a way to redistribute funds, and she's trying to make it out to be like a negative thing when they're actually getting creative. So all of the things are still happening and they're trying to make it sound like it's all bad, but it's like every time they try to, it's like it all is working out
periodically to the White House, but it's supposed to go through a lot of channels. And in this case, the attack on the East Wing went through none of those things. Now, what's going to happen there, we don't know. Trump says he's going to build this giant ballroom. It sounds like a complete monstrosity, but there's a lot of ifs in all this. And one of the things that's very symbolic, I think, about the attack on the East Wing is that it's very easy to tear things apart. It's one heck of a lot harder to build them back. And one of the things that I think about is what I think about the rebuilding of our governmental structures, not the physical structures, the institutions that have been decimated. But those of you who are good at this stuff, and I am not, should think about what a Washington remade should look like, what a White House remade should look like, and dream big. But one of the things that I think about a lot is that rose garden. And when I think about, I don't know anything about buildings, but I do know a little bit about plants. When I think about that rose garden and what a rose garden full of historic roses might look like, you know, that gives you something to think about, that offers an alternative to what is currently.
They're trying to do like Build Back Better, but they're also trying to do, they're trying to do the build trust back up in institutions, but they're the ones that contributed to the loss of trust in institutions. Okay. And they're trying to act like Trump is just a Republican, and they're trying to act like he's this like extreme faction. But what we have seen is a rotation of elites. So what we have seen is the revamping of the Republican Party, which is, and we, a couple shows ago, we actually went over this and chronicled how she was actually saying, and a segment was called "Who's Going to Tell Them?" Right? Her and her friend Joanne, that what she is suggesting and sees is happening, which is inverted, is this MAGA moment where MAGA has already done that, right? MAGA has already had that revamping of the party. And so that's why, right. So that's why these things are falling flat and so she's trying to like narrative jam into the winning messaging, but what she's missing, either on purpose or whatever, unbeknownst to her, is that people are awake, right? And so people realize this. And so there are far less people to use this messaging on, because everybody's already moving along. Everybody that already voted for Trump, everybody that just is already moving along with these things that are not bothered. No one is bothered by these things. People are living their lives. They're not bothered by these things. That this is what they voted for. They're already caught up. This is not new. So it's almost like she's trying to use the winning messaging on her audience, or trying to do like a law of attraction, manifesting it with the marketing messaging that is falling flat because it doesn't align with the reality.
Essentially a mini Mar-a-Lago in the people's house. So that's what's going on with the East Wing.
Can the White House
and if
get
you are
Miami
upset
weather
about
too?
it, you need to speak up. And this is something that has nothing to do with partisanship. That was our house. That was our property. And somebody that we put in there temporarily just started knocking it down. And imagine if this were a renter that had done this to your property that you loved. You wouldn't say, oh, well, too bad. I mean, you would say, we're going to figure out how to fix it.
They did. I mean, how, like with the farmers, when they tried to come and take the farm and all of this, I mean, and this is super tone deaf, right? I mean, because people get their home foreclosed on, right? So, I mean, this is so tone deaf to the actual plight of people that live in the United States. And so it seems like, I mean, she's definitely talking to a specific demographic, the people that are at the No Kings, right? This, again, specific demographic that would resonate with this sort of shock and awe about, this is our house, this is the people's house.
But you wouldn't let it keep on going. And every single, especially Republican lawmaker, should hear about this in great detail about how angry you are, if in fact you are angry. I am. All right. So you asked about the East Wing. A couple of things you didn't ask. Well, I'll put that in later. Somebody asked a really good question about the shutdown, the government shutdown. Is it really the Republicans' fault, or are both parties equally to blame? So that's a more complicated question than you think. And there are a lot of layers to it that I'm not going to go deeply into. I have said before on these webcasts, not for a while, so if you're just starting to listen, you won't have heard this from me. I don't like this whole system of the filibuster in the Senate, which means essentially nothing can ever go through except with 60 votes. And this idea that instead of actually bringing up measures that Congress debates and then passes or not, which is how it's supposed to work, instead what we've been getting are these giant omnibus bills at the end of every year, because there are a couple of categories of measures that come through Congress that cannot be filibustered. And so what we have ended up with are these sort of giant omnibus bills that end up at the end of the year, and they have to pass because otherwise the government won't be funded. And everybody throws everything in but the kitchen sink, and sometimes the kitchen sink in there. That's both parties, and I freaking hate that. I can't tell you how stupid I think that is. I get why we're there, but we need to fix that because, there's no debate over these measures anymore. They just get thrown in this bill, and then there you are. That's both parties, and that's a problem. There's a lot of things we need to untangle in our system, but that's not really what's going on here in this case. In this case, this Congress has been the least effective Congress. It has gotten the least done in our history.
This Congress has been the least effective Congress, but this president has been the most effective getting shit done. That's funny.
Simply cannot get anything done. And the reason for that is not the Democrats, who are not in power. They do not have a majority in either the House or the Senate. The reason for that is the Republicans. And you sit there and you say, well, they got a majority. Why can't they get anything done? Because they are deeply factionalized. That is broken up into smaller groups. And if you recognize that, they have not been able to get an appropriations bill, a single appropriations bill through Congress. They need to pass 12 in order to fund the government. The appropriations bills come out of the committees that deal with the budget. There are 12 of those committees, so there are 12 appropriations bills. The appropriations process.
Okay. This is
buy-in because you can pass a budget reconciliation bill. There's a certain number of bills every year that you can do that with. Budget reconciliation is one of them that only require a majority in the Senate could say, oh yeah, we cave, we don't care.
Okay, this is.
But there will be a vote on whether or not the Congress will demand the release of the Epstein files.
Oh my God.
It is widely believed that if a vote happens, that a number of Republicans, some people have said as many as 100, will jump ship and will vote in favor for the release of those files.
Okay.
We don't know. You never know what's going to happen with a vote like that. And Johnson is dead determined that's not going to happen. A lot of you asked about what's going on with the Epstein files and the Epstein case, and that is that it still goes on, not least with the release today of Nobody's Girl, the memoir of Virginia Giuffre, who was the one of the early whistleblowers of what was happening with the sex trafficking around Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex trafficker, and his associate convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell. That book came out today. I have not read it. The excerpts I've seen from it suggest that she tells a lot about how the system worked and who the privileged people or how the privileged people in it worked. I'm not sure that there is much that applies to the White House that we didn't already know, but I don't know. I haven't read it yet, and probably won't. Maybe ever, but at least for a while. I have so many books I got to read right now for really pressing political stuff as well. All right. So where I'm going with this, actually, you asked more questions and I'm already at 30 minutes. Listen, I'm going to pull this together and take a few more minutes to pull this together because I guess I see so much stuff has happened and it's hard to make sense of it. The other thing that I haven't talked at all about that is crucially important is the administration's ongoing, apparently, attacks on Venezuela.
Ongoing, apparently,
and what's going on with the Trump administration's attacks on the leader of Venezuela.
A little bit.
Nicolas Maduro, who is no prize. He was, he was elected as somebody on the left, but like all authoritarians, pretty much took over the country pretty quickly. What's happened in Venezuela is more than a little bit heartbreaking. But the Trump administration has been launching what certainly appears to be an attempt at regime change in Venezuela.
Oh.
That's what people who are watching seem to think he is up to,
Really?
with this idea that bombing these speedboats in the Caribbean is an attack on the Maduro, what he calls narco-terrorism. But those speedboats are 1,000 miles from the U.S. They certainly don't seem to be actually narco-terrorists in the sense that Trump is using it, that directly threaten the United States. And of course, it appears the U.S. has also hit boats that involve people from other nations, including Colombia and Ecuador. And those two of those people who survived a U.S. attack, the Trump administration has actually returned to their home countries rather than trying them, which suggests they have real concerns about a legal case against them in the United States. So there's the attack on Venezuela, but there is also at the same time the support for the Argentinian government under Javier Milei, who is a Trump ally, and he's the guy who ran around with a chainsaw. He was going to cut, great austerity, the whole thing, and that has ended up with the Argentine economy crumbling. And the value of the Argentine peso crumbling. And the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, has today signed an agreement that the U.S. will engage in extraordinary measures to help prop up the Argentine economy before Javier Milei comes up for election any day now. I don't remember when that election is. And that includes a $20 billion peso for dollar swap, I think it is. We've also purchased a lot of pesos, and he's trying to put Bessent is trying to put $20 billion of private capital also behind the Argentine economy. But the Wall Street Journal reports that they're having a really hard time getting anybody to want to do that, because this system of propping up a foreign government has never worked in the past, at least according to Paul Krugman's Substack. And so it looks as if the U.S. government might have to step in and support that. One of the reasons it appears that we have done that is because one of Scott Bessent's pals put a lot of money behind the Argentine economy, and he stands to lose a lot if he doesn't get out before it collapses altogether. So you have what certainly seems to be let me throw one more thing out. Donald Trump's pardon either yesterday or in congressman who was the one who was such a con and was convicted. Trump pardoned him, or commuted his sentence, didn't pardon him, I'm sorry, commuted his sentence. So what are we looking at here? It certainly looks as if a government in the United States that is trying to undercut governments in Latin America that it doesn't like and support governments that it does like, putting the might of the United States behind a certain kind of pro-Trump, pro-MAGA government in Latin America, at the same time that in the United States.
Not unlike the, propping up Ukraine that we just went through.
States, they are putting that same sort of muscle behind pardoning friends, pardoning cronies, going after those they perceive to be their enemies. And people like the New York Attorney General Letitia James, for example, or former FBI Director James Comey. And at the same time, exercising extraordinary power, going after the White House with a backhoe and with the tools of destruction was really in your face. And it was designed to be in your face, to the point, I think, that other people who aren't as behind MAGA recognize that the American people shouldn't see these images because we will be so angry about them. And all of that is happening in a really interesting moment as Trump's popularity continues to plummet, as the economy in the United States continues to hurt ordinary people, especially now with the upcoming increases in health premiums, and at a time when people are increasingly turning out to oppose this administration. So it's almost like there are two very different stories. You're seeing this administration really doubling down on the idea that it can do whatever it wants. It's using the economic might of the American people to support Javier Milei, to support strikes against Venezuela and possibly other countries as well. You're seeing that use of American might to serve MAGA ideology, which is a right-wing ideology that at least in part overlaps with Nazism, which you've seen in a number of things lately, but most recently in the fact that one of Trump's key nominees was just exposed yesterday for having said he has a Nazi streak in him and parroting a lot of language that is very reminiscent of fascist movements. So you're seeing that on the one hand, and at the same time, you're seeing a real pushback from the American people against that. What does that look like going forward? First of all, I think we're going to see a lot of more attempts on the part of the Trump administration simply to throw their weight around and do whatever they want. But in this moment where I started out was saying the momentum is on the American people who don't want that, who take a look at $40 billion going in to prop up Argentina, the Argentinian economy under this right-wing wackadoodle, and saying, you know, if you got $40 billion to be thrown around, here's a thought. Why don't you throw it into things like U.S. healthcare or housing policy or back into SNAP benefits? Or how about pushing back a little bit on the cuts you made to Medicaid?
Oh, I have to stop for a second. Oh, okay. Doing MAGA face again. So just to be clear, you're suggesting that instead of funding for other countries, right, throwing money at other countries, you think that maybe that money should go towards making America better? Huh, really? Making healthcare better, making housing better, maybe helping the medical system with the pharmaceuticals. Are you saying not funding foreign entities, but rather reinvesting back in America? Is that what you're suggesting? Because my mind goes straight to the whole Democratic Congress wearing their Ukraine flags, pins, waving their Ukraine flags. Zelensky standing in front of the, you know, where the Speaker of the House is, right? Addressing our Congress. I mean, he's not the only foreign leader to do that, of course, but this is a very overt. Marjorie Taylor Greene was just talking about this. She talks a lot about, you know, the lobbying of AIPAC. She says it's not just Israel, it's other countries too, that America, she is America first, that, and she actually was just on, I think, the Tim Dillon show, and she was just on the Tucker Carlson show as well, saying these very same things. I stand on these principles. I stand on the principles that Donald Trump ran on, which is that we are investing back in America, that we are investing in a healthcare system, but why invest in one that's broken, that needs to be realigned, that needs to be fixed to the betterment of the American people? So to hear Richardson say this and using this thing, this just happened with the Argentina, but now they scoop up this talking point and they're like, why are we sending all this money to another government, a Trump aligned other radical?
And all of the places in which the government should be, and I would argue, could be, and I would argue should be investing in the American people. So if you think about the larger picture here, what you really see is these two dramatically different ideologies. One embraced by the Trump administration, saying that what we really need to do is cut taxes and regulations so a very few individuals can run the country and perhaps the world the way people like Javier Milei would like to, and Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban in Hungary and so on. And on the other hand, you see people saying, hey, wait a minute here. What about investing in the American people? And I will continue to make the argument that where we are right now is with the idea that we, the people, regardless of party, I've said at least two things here today that are ones that are on different sides of the political divide, that we are in a nonpartisan way, we would like our government to respond to our needs, not to those of this small cabal that is using our economic power and our military power to try to prop up a decaying figurehead who is literally taking a sledgehammer to the White House and to everything that implies. So when you think about going forward, one of the other questions you asked is, can the Supreme Court overturn a future Supreme Court overturn Donald J. Trump versus U.S., which is the July 1st, 2024 decision that says the president cannot be prosecuted for crimes committed as part of his official duties? Absolutely it can. Think of the Supreme Court decisions that have been overturned in the past. Plessy versus Ferguson, for example, overturned in 1954 by Brown versus Board. And I could go on through a whole bunch of things, things like the change over income taxes and so on, although that was eventually overturned by a constitutional amendment. These things can all be changed going forward. We can even replant the roses in the rose garden, but we are going to have to continue to keep pressure up on this administration. And one of the other questions that people asked is, what about a general strike? And I want to be really clear when I talk about these things. I feel strongly about people speaking up in their own way. I am not the ultimate arbiter of what works and what doesn't. Going forward, there's whole schools of people who study the best places to put pressure. I am not one of them. What I can tell you is what works well in the past and why some things work better than others. And I will tell you, in the United States, that's not true in other countries, but in the United States, general strikes tend not to work. They tend to get to split that big tent I started talking about, because once you start a general strike, because this is such a big country, different people get badly hurt by their own allies because of supply chains and food chains and so on. What does work really well in the United States is targeted boycotts, where you say, I am not going to continue to buy your product because of your support for something I dislike. Those work incredibly well. And that's another good opportunity to boycott those organizations that are supporting the Trump administration, that are supporting the tearing down of the White House, for example. That's a really good time now's a really good time to throw your financial weight behind that and figure out workarounds where you can support causes that you do care about. Much easier to do in a targeted way. Look at Tesla, for example. Look at Target. Look what happened to both of them when people said, I'm not going to shop there anymore because of the way that you have treated
Target got rid of
people that I care about.
Little section,
and similarly, how Costco has done so very.
Okay, this is let's hurry.
So what can you do? Keep speaking up. Keep going out, keep making connections. And again, I hope the No Kings rallies and the No Kings protests really impressed on people how your skills, whatever they are, really matter. That, you think about the signs that were so fabulous and got shared again and again and again, and the videos and the dancing and the laughing and all of that stuff really matters, because it does create this atmosphere that encourages people to speak up about the things they care about. And the next one's going to be bigger, and people are going to be more willing to turn out, and all of those things are going to continue to matter. So speak out, and crucially, get involved. And I cannot emphasize enough, I've said it again and again, but this is the real kicker here. There are 52,000 races on the ballot in November. School boards, state offices, governorships, petitions, state judges, really important, especially 3 seats in Pennsylvania. Find out what they are, show up, and vote the whole ticket, because most of those are going to be decided by turnout. Call your friends, make sure people know about it. That's what you can focus on in the short term.
Don't even read
Get people to turn out for those elections around the country, especially the key ones, but in your towns, make sure that people know those elections are happening. 52,000 of them. Show up for them, get people out. Make sure that people understand that we do not have to wait for 2026 to make a difference in our democracy. All right. I'm gonna go back to work. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Oh, sorry guys. Okay, I really am sorry. No, I really am sorry. We have to go through that sometimes, but we just have to, just for the historical record. Okay, we just got to get it on there. So thanks for hanging tight with us on that. We're going to go to the next clip that we have is the clip for the Norm Eisen clip. Okay, and so this is the researcher on X, and it says, so this is Norm was no doubt involved in the demo. Okay. So this is Neera Tanden. Oh, so this is, I'm just going to read what the researcher says. Okay. This is just what they wrote. This is lawfare coordinator. I'm trying to think about my transcript here and I'm not going to read this actually, because this is, you can just go to his site here, but this is Neera Tanden. And this looks like this is the Center for American Progress. And she shares a stage with Norm Eisen and Beto O'Rourke. And let's just listen to what it says, what they say.
Democrats or others can respond, and just what's the timeline of action here, so we can all understand what not only Texas Democrats or people in Texas should be doing, but we should all be doing.
Give me the day I can sue, please, Beto. I need to circle it on my calendar.
Well, hopefully you won't have to sue, because we'll defeat it.
Yeah, that would be great. I think, so I guess the kind of the bad news related to this,
I'm sorry. I just want to say that this was filmed in, this was like a month and a half ago. This was posted, or I'm sorry, this was, hold on. I want to get this right for you. I'm sorry. This was shared on August 29th, 2025. And yes, okay. Sorry about that. Here we go. Sorry, I'm screwing this up for you. My apologies. Let me go back to it. Oh, it's not letting me screen share. Screen share. Let me try it again. Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. The screen sharing feature. Let me try again. It doesn't want us to see it. What's going on? Why does that work? Our regular screen sharing is not working, but it looks like this is working. So I guess we'll just go with this then. So you can see my face. All right.
Yeah, that would be great. I think, So I guess the kind of the bad news related to this, and following what Norm just said, is that, you know, in Texas, we don't really have a democracy. And I would argue we really don't have one in America at large. And I think maybe the consensus now, post-2024, was it was awfully confusing for people to hear Democrats argue that we should save our democracy. Because everyday Americans were wondering what it is that we were saving. You know, a democracy, is that where one person can spend almost $300 million to elect their preferred candidate for the presidency? Is a democracy one in which members of Congress can choose their own voters? Is a democracy a place where corporations are people and money is speech, and corporations can spend whatever they want to not just affect, but to purchase the outcomes of elections? And about those Democrats, you know, in the wake of Shelby versus Holder, which eviscerated the Voting Rights Act, which we are responsible for passing in 1965 as a party and as a people, thanks to a 24-year-old John Lewis. When we had that trifecta in 2021, and we had the For the People Act, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, we had the opportunity to actually protect the people in Texas. We had the power. Like, it wasn't something we could blame on Republicans. We had the numbers to get this done. We just said to the American people, it's just not that important. And so that's what lands us here. That's the bad news. The good news is we do have ways in which we can fight back. You know, one, I mentioned the opportunity in California, or potentially if there's anything to squeeze out of Illinois or New York or other states where Democrats hold unitary power. Number two, the Democratic members of the state house can walk out and deny their Republican colleagues a quorum with which to redraw these boundaries. It's a tough, tall order. They're fined $500 a day every day that they're not in quorum. They get paid something like $11,000 or $12,000 a year. Many of them have, you know, other jobs as well. But they'll have DPS state troopers coming after them. In Trump's America, would not be surprised if they had DHS or FBI or Secret Service or any other federal law enforcement agency hunting them down to drag them back to the state capitol. But if they're able to stay away long enough, and I think we've been very clear about what the stakes are in this fight, not only can they deny this redistricting, but I think they will really rally this country right now. We have very few rally points. We had one at the CR, the funding to keep the government open a few months back, which we just fucked up as a party. Thank you, Chuck Schumer. You know, this was our chance to stand and fight and to deny Trump and Musk the money that they were asking for to spend on whatever they chose, to deny them the freedom to eviscerate and destroy this federal government. And we absolutely folded. This is the next big fight. It is Texas. I don't know how many more we're going to get before the midterms. And you want to at least get caught trying. You want to get out there and give it everything you can. And you want to win, obviously. You want the outcome that you are pursuing. But you also want to inspire your fellow Americans, show them the example in their own fights, in their own states, and in their own places. And the third opportunity to fight back is if these, God forbid, new districts are drawn, they will be drawn at the expense of existing Republican majority districts. They'll have to bleed out some Republican voters to make these other districts more competitive for Republicans. So it may actually put more districts in play, taking a page out of Norm's book and not waiting to react to begin action. We're already out there, as you said earlier, registering eligible, likely Democrats who are not currently on the rolls. And then because this is the toughest state in the nation in which to cast a ballot, we personally stay in touch with each and every single one of those newly registered voters to make sure that they can navigate our voting laws on voter ID, polling places, everything else that they throw in front of you to try to keep you from voting in the first place. So 3 clear ways in which we can fight back. We must pursue them all in parallel. And I do think there's a chance that we can win this one.
Great. Norm, did you want to jump in there?
I think that I believe we still do have a democracy, if an imperfect one. But the stakes, the reason that Texas redistricting matters so much is because it could tilt the 2026 outcome. And 2026 is really for all the marbles, because if you are unable to at least get a pro-democracy majority in one house of Congress. If you can't break that monopoly on constitutional power that MAGA has at the moment assembled, and also particularly in our down ballot races, governor, AG, Secretary of State, also 26. By the way, we'll get an important preview, I think, in 2025, Virginia, New Jersey, the Pennsylvania races, including for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Oh, they want them.
That's the tipping point. 2026 is the tipping point. And Donald Trump knows that. That's why he's focusing. He knows it can come down to a handful of races in the House of Representatives. That's why democracy is really at stake in this Texas fight. And all of us need to reconsider all of the options that are on the table to make it count.
Could I ask?
Yeah.
Could I ask you a question? So I take your point, or at least understand your perspective on this still being a democracy. So I don't know what you thought of what you would call America, post Reconstruction to 1965. Is it a democracy or not? If you're black, and in many states, if you're brown and you can't cast a ballot, I don't think it is. Functionally and effectively in Texas, you have drawn out and locked out millions of people, discriminating based on age, on race, on ethnicity, on geography. To me, it's something less than a democracy. It's not an autocracy. It's not a dictatorship yet. I think you're right on that. Here's a larger point that I wanted to make, is getting back to this idea of whether we're going to be on defense or offense. I think we have to share with our fellow Americans a vision of what it would be like to live in a democracy. Like if you didn't have big money in politics, if you were able to overturn Citizens United, if members of Congress couldn't be involved in choosing their own voters, if you had term limits so that you can't serve for the rest of your natural life with all the power that incumbency brings to that, if in other words, you really do return that power back to the people, I think there's got to be some way that we acknowledge that this is not either it's not a democracy, or it's not the democracy that we often talk about and tout to the rest of the world, because I think that's closer to the reality that Americans are living through. And so many young people that I'm listening to are just like, the hell with this. I get that this is rigged. This thing doesn't work. I'm not going to participate. I think if we acknowledge that, and at least are candid with them, there may be a chance to work with them and say, hey, you're right, this thing isn't working the way it should. Would you join me in the fight to make sure that it ultimately does, not just stopping the bad guys?
So can I follow up on this point? Because I think this is like a really important kind of meta point almost, which is when we're talking about political reform and we're talking about democracy.
Sorry, did she just say a MAGA point? Did she
think
say
a question
point? Hold on.
Meta point almost.
Maybe a meta point. Okay. Because this is what MAGA has done, right? This is what happened. That MAGA saw, this is what January 6th was about. This was about the stolen election. Because MAGA got very serious and involved in election integrity. Okay. So there has been multiple grassroots efforts over the years, starting very heavily in after 2020. Okay. And so for him to lay this out, I think he is he's saying the quiet part out loud that they don't want to necessarily talk about and want to admit, or maybe they don't agree at all. So that they either agree and don't want to talk about it, or they don't agree and they don't want to talk about it, or, but you can clearly see this riff between O'Rourke and Eisen, but O'Rourke trying to say, I've talked to people, Eisen's still saying like 2026 is for all the marbles, right? Because 2024 was for all the marbles and 2020 was for all the marbles and all the things. But what O'Rourke is speaking to is what people are saying, like, I know this is rigged. Like there's something going on here, right? And it's not just the election is rigged, the system is rigged. It's that the campaign finance reform, he talked about Citizens United. It is the fact that you can have as long as you're being funded by different lobbyists and donors to run these campaigns. That's why it took Donald Trump, someone who was independently wealthy, to come in and do the renaissance of the Republican Party that we saw. And so this is what MAGA has done and said, come with me. And I mentioned this in the No King in the other show that we did, was that they want to talk about the No Kings being this nationwide protest. Well, the reason why MAGA never has a nationwide protest is because it's focused on Donald Trump, because he is the political solution that everyone can rally against, right? Look at the alliance between Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., and Donald Trump, right? And then, of course, you have Tulsi Gabbard and that the pulling in from these different parties, right? And but he's saying, yes, I agree with you, right? Right. This is what Donald Trump did in 2016. And if you watch the Mike Benz video that we shared and went through, how Norm Eisen, who's the other person sitting there, they had this whole thing that they've spent millions of dollars on to silence and censor people because they wanted to not normalize Donald Trump. They wanted to pretend that he was beyond the pale. They wanted to pretend that this was just a one-off, and they're still doing it. But they wanted to silence anybody that was normalizing Donald Trump, and they wanted to say that we have the moral authority, we have the moral mandate here. Even though Donald Trump won, he doesn't have the actual authority. We have the moral authority here to then do. And they did all these censorship campaigns and projects that had to do with misinformation and disinformation and malinformation. Well, we just sat through Richardson doing all kinds of disinformation, right? Acting like a historian from this authority bias figure, speaking as though there's no editorializing at all, this position of authority, doing complete speculation, complete editorializing, opinion-based party politics, one-sided, completely biased. So anyway, O'Rourke has it right in the sense that he's saying we cannot use democracy as a marketing tool because it doesn't work, because people don't believe we have a democracy in the way that you guys are presenting that we do, right? So you have to have the consent of the governed. And that's why MAGA is building back trust up in institutions, right? That's why the election integrity, although it almost everybody got persecuted. That's why we couldn't go on YouTube, because you couldn't talk about the elections. You couldn't talk about elections. And they came up with this election denialism. They came up with this term, you want to loop in media literacy, they came up with this term, election denialism, like it always existed, but it was actually created specifically in 2022 to talk about those who denied the election of 2020 going to Joe Biden. They denied the election results of 2020. Anybody that had anybody that even thought maybe all of these anomalies, maybe all of these affidavits and these testimonies and these anomalies across all of these states, maybe there's something to that. Maybe we should investigate it further. Maybe we should look into that. Maybe we should get more active on a local level. Maybe we should ask our elected officials a little bit more about that. Maybe we should continue to seek transparency, right? And how can we make our elections transparent and build trust in them? Because right now we're like, and it's not just because of Donald Trump. People saw with their own eyes. People saw the water main break. They saw them putting the cardboard up. They saw Leah Hoops and Greg Stenstrom in Delaware County with the USB drives. They have it on tape. Like, people saw things they saw votes flip on machines. People gave affidavits saying, I went and I clicked on this person and it switched to a different person. Making the argument that it was nefarious or not, at least listen to the claims that a person is making, right? And if it's a one-off, that's one thing, but it was like a pattern across the board, right? So what he's saying is, I think, the right thing, but it's something that MAGA has already fleshed out and gone through. And so anyway, so I thought she said this is a MAGA thing, but I think she said it's a meta thing.
Which is when we're talking about political, talking a really important kind of meta point almost, which is when we're talking about political reform and we're talking about democracy, I think a question here is how do we get through the two different sides of the river here, right? Which is, if we say the system is rigged, right? If we constantly are like, acknowledge the system is rigged. The system is obviously rigged in multiple ways. But then how does that inspire people? Does that inspire people to action, or does that actually demobilize people because they just acknowledge the system is rigged? But then if we don't acknowledge this, if we don't discuss where people are, then how do we also not seem in on it, right? So I think the challenge, I mean, right now we have, you know, from my perspective, speaking for me, the most corrupt administration I have ever seen. It's like innovating in the ways it's corrupting
The envy of corruptors around the world.
It's like the level of creativity for corruption.
If there were an Ig Nobel Prize for mastering corruption, Donald Trump would get it.
And one of the challenge was with mobilizing people on this topic is, and look, people are disgusted. I'm not saying they aren't, but one of the challenges is that they're like, everybody does it, right? Like, you know, politicians, blah, blah, blah. And so I think this is.
Because if we are authentic with our voters, we're out of a job. Because we only know how to be manipulative and use deceit. And for Norm, come on, sir. So how can we admit to our constituents and our voters that shit's fucked up without saying, oh, we're in on it? It sounds like they're in a real quandary here, huh? So that's why, you know, because Donald Trump being an outsider and him coming in and saying, you know, and he said, I know this because I'm one of them. You guys are not going to get this. You are not going to get this because you don't have it. I don't know. Josh Shapiro ain't going to help you. I don't know who you're, you know, but how can you admit that there's a problem without admitting that you're in on it, right? So this is what, you know, how did MAGA do it, right? They saw the injustices. They saw it with their own eyes. You don't have the reality in your favor to show people with their own eyes. The best you can do is a backhoe to the east wing of the White House. The best you can do is fascism and authoritarianism. That's the best you can do. And most people are still like, I don't know anything about that. No, most people are like, no, I don't think so. You know, people that are into the narratives and the propaganda, they're going to roll with it. They're going to post on their Facebook page. They're going to be into that because that's the echo chamber of that. And like, people are hooked there. And, but most people are still, you know, you're not going to rebuild your party in the ways that you've been doing it. And so this is all about keeping power for them. This is all about keeping power for them. This is all about how do we get people to vote? How do we get people to come out? How do we keep doing the things that we're doing with elections? How do we stay in power? This isn't about, because O'Rourke just said it. He said we had an opportunity to serve the people and we didn't do it. He admits it. They don't care about doing what's right for their constituents. They're talking about preserving power. And then they want to project onto Donald Trump and his administration that all they want to do is preserve power. And all he wants to do is just make more money. You guys are suing him and he's already had to shell out all this money. So he was more successful before he ran for president. Like, why did he even run in the first place? Because he thought he was going to make more money with his brand getting trashed? You don't think his brand is, I mean, he's definitely an international name now. I mean, his entire brand has changed, but everybody loved him before he announced that he was running for office. He was loved by everybody. Everybody wanted to get into, you know, use his name and his brand. He was in all the rap videos and in the movies and everything. So this idea that like he just wants to use his position and everybody just wants to get rich. Yeah, people are opportunists and people just like all of you guys. And people want to, yes, like make money and further themselves. They are driven by innovation and they are driven by making deals. He says it himself, like he's driven by this. Yeah, he wants to make deals, but he just said in a video the other day that he wants to make deals for the American people. Like he wants to make deals for America. He wants to do diplomacy, and that's like what he's doing. Like he's working his ass off, just like he said. He's flying to all these different places. Like he's just nonstop doing diplomacy, making deals, doing relationships. When he did the Middle East peace plan thing, he got his picture taken with like 50 different people, like all in one time. Like the whole, like all these people shake their hand, talk about, you know, like he works his ass off. So yeah, I mean, I guess this is like a thought session here with all of us, but we're just tracking it. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell y'all, but let's just finish this video and then we will wrap it up.
This is like a crucial question of how do we acknowledge. I do think that means that when you have power, you actually have to do things like end stock trades, etc. But I also think we have to figure out how we don't create the rationale for people to exit the system. And I think a little bit of that has happened too.
You just empower people like with election integrity. You actually don't do power over people. You don't manipulate them and lie to them. And you want to say that Trump is a con artist and you want to say that he's lying to people. And, you know, he is doing marketing and he is talking to a demographic. He's talking broadly and specifically. So he's doing multiple things. He's talking to his friends and he's talking to his foes at the same time. He's talking to America's allies and he's talking to America's enemies. He's talking to people that want him dead and he's talking to people that love him. He's talking to all different kinds of people and he's doing it all at the same time. And so he does make it look easy, I think, because he's made for this in this moment, but he makes it look easy. And so it's easy for people to say, he's an idiot, or he doesn't know what he's doing, or he's lying to people. People don't take him as completely telling the truth. Like people are not taking every single thing he says to heart. People know he's a bullshitter. That's why he was hired, to clean this shit up. And we're not going to go over it today, but DNI Gabbard just came out and made a huge statement about investigations that they're working on or whatever they were doing with the cartel, the specific child trafficker, that just the most horrific thing that maybe the Department of Intelligence has ever said about the trafficker that lures pregnant women, right? And then sells their babies, performs cesarean sections on them and then sells their babies. She was just on, you know, you can look that up. We're not going to play it here right now. Anyway, yeah. So the Congress might not be very effective, but the administration is actually getting shit done. And what else?
We're all constantly all saying they're all terrible.
Oh, yeah, because they're afraid that if they let the cat out of the bag, that people aren't going to come vote. Well, you don't really have, what do you have to lose at this point? I mean, I guess you could still just, I mean, believe you me, keep doing what you're doing, really. Just keep doing what you're doing. Nobody's surprised. Nobody's intimidated. But you know, giving people the education and the tools and the power and the knowledge to actually become educated on civics, get engaged, get involved. And that's what the election integrity grassroots movement did in 2020 and 2021, and they haven't stopped. So you're saying that what people are going to lose faith in the system. People already have it. So you have to empower people to get involved and get engaged. And that's what Richardson's doing. That's what even O'Rourke suggested, is that we have to look like we're trying. We have to get caught trying. We have to inspire people across the country and other states. But the reality and the truth is not on your side. And so that's where you're going to have a hard time. And that's where you've had a hard time, because you had Kamala Harris going up there trying to talk about middle class, right? I mean, everything is just bad. Everything's just off, tone deaf, off, bad, because the reality is not lining up with the messaging. So until you guys are willing to hold your own feet to the fire, and I see a little bit of that happening here a little bit, then you're just going to keep losing people, and you're going to keep perpetuating that which you're saying you don't want to do, because you're afraid to tell them, because they can't handle the truth, or they're going to disengage if they find out this is all a sham. I mean, people are probably a little bit more hip to it than you think. And if you keep lying to them, though, right? If you keep rolling out projects like Richardson, and you keep lying to people, and you keep them in this echo chamber where they go out there and think that they're protesting fascism and authoritarianism, like, yeah. What do you think?
And no, there's no difference. Voting Rights Act, even in what you said just a few minutes ago, 99.9% of Democrats voted for the John Lewis Act. There were 2 who wouldn't overturn the filibuster. So it's not like the parties were the same on this. They were radically different. I think those 2 senators were wrong. They aren't actually in power anymore. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like the parties were the same and ignoring the Voting Rights Act. And I just think we have to figure out how we navigate to be honest with people about the level of corruption, and the fact that people, in a sense, buy elections here in a way that they don't in other countries, right? That is a base problem. But if we also just say, we don't really have a democracy, does that turn more people out of the system, off the system, or into the system? And I think that's just a big question.
They are so tone deaf. They have spent the last 25, 30 years preserving their power, that they became so tone deaf to real people, right? They became so tone deaf to real people, to their actual voters. And they started looking outwards instead of looking in their own neighborhoods. They started looking outwards, and they sold us out to other countries. That's what America First is about. It's about reversing that and untangling all of that. And that's what the Trump administration is doing. And that's what people voted him to do. You guys might be trying to figure this out, but everybody else is on board and understands what's going on. And we are just, along for the ride, because there's only so much that you can do. And we understand that. Most people understand that. But the only people that are building trust back up institutions is not the Democrats. It's everybody else. Okay, whether you are identify as a Republican, a conservative, a libertarian, an independent, whoever, if you left the Democratic Party and you are and you may even be saying maybe you're Maha, maybe you're saying I don't agree with everything Trump says. I wouldn't consider myself a Trump supporter. I would prefer him not to be the president, but I understand what the alternative is. I understand what the other option was because I lived it. I mean, how many people are actually saying that? So they see and they understand. And that's what the actual Big Tent coalition, y'all fucked this up so hard by ostracizing Kennedy. I mean, I don't know, dude. That's crazy town though, because he is getting to work. I don't know. So, all right. Well, we are almost at an hour and a half. This has been fun. Thank you for bearing with me. We have to get through it sometimes. And she's on a roll. She puts out so much content. She has so much, help. I'm sure that she's just rolling out the content so much. So we have to stay on it, because we got to see, we got to get all the different angles, have these conversations, and see what's going on, because we want to, help other people and get onto some sort of a page and not be gaslit, right? Not be gaslit. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Have a beautiful weekend. Like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.